The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room Dawson had ever seen in her life. It stretched for nearly a mile in every direction, with ceilings so high that clouds actually formed near the top. The walls were made of some kind of living crystal that shifted colors depending on the mood of the room. Right now, they were a cold, unwelcoming blue. Stood alone on a small platform in the center of this massive space. She was 43 years old, with short brown hair that was starting to show streaks of gray. She wore the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, a simple dark blue suit with silver trim that suddenly felt very plain compared to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by the beings surrounding her. 47 different species had sent representatives to this council, had memorized all their names, their histories, their customs, and their preferences during the 6 months it had taken her ship to travel here. She had prepared for every possible question. She had practiced her speeches until she could deliver them in her sleep. She had done everything right. None of it mattered. High Arbiter rose from his throne at the far end of the chamber. He was one of the oldest and most powerful species in the known galaxy. His body was vaguely humanoid but covered in smooth gray scales. He had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his face, and when he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The matter of humanity has been decided," announced. "By unanimous vote, the species known as humans are hereby exiled from all Council-protected space. They are to be relocated to Sector Omega 9, effective immediately." Felt her stomach drop. She had known things were going badly. The preliminary meetings had been disasters. Every species she approached had looked at her with the same expression, a mixture of boredom and mild disgust, like she was an insect that had wandered into their home. But she had held on to hope that the final vote might go differently. That someone, anyone, might speak up for humanity. No one had. "May I ask why?" said, keeping her voice as steady as she could manage. Her hands were shaking, but she clasped them behind her back where no one could see. "We have committed no crimes. We have started no wars. We simply asked to join your community." A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. Several representatives made sounds that recognized as laughter, though the sounds themselves were deeply alien. Clicks and whistles and low rumbles that made her teeth vibrate. The representative, a creature even larger than the High Arbiter, rose from his seat. His name was Oran, and he was the one who had argued most strongly against humanity's admission to the Council. His compound eyes reflected its image thousands of times over, making her feel very small. "You are too young," Oran said. His voice was like 2 pieces of metal grinding together. "Your species achieved merely 200 years ago. You have been traveling between stars for less than 100. This is nothing. This is the blink of an eye." He gestured with one of his 4 arms toward the other representatives in the chamber. "The youngest member of this council is They have traveled the stars for 11,000 years. My own people, achieved before your species had discovered fire. We built empires that spanned galaxies while your ancestors were still living in caves and hitting each other with rocks." More laughter echoed through the chamber. Felt her face grow hot with shame and anger, but she forced herself to remain calm. Losing her temper now would only prove their point. "With respect," said, "age is not the same as wisdom. Our species may be young, but we have accomplished much in our short time among the stars. We have colonized 12 worlds. We have developed technologies that rival many council species. We have shown that we can be peaceful neighbors and valuable trading partners." "You have shown that you breed quickly and spread like a disease," Oran replied. 12 worlds in less than a century. How many more will it be in another century? How long before you begin to encroach on territories that belong to established civilizations? We have no intention of. Your intentions do not matter. We have seen your kind before. Young species full of energy and ambition, convinced that the universe owes them something. They expand too quickly. They demand too much. and eventually they start wars that devastate entire regions of space. Iran's compound eyes seem to bore into Seoul. We will not allow that to happen again. The Council exists to maintain order in the galaxy, to prevent conflict, to ensure that civilization endures, and the best way to ensure that is to keep young, unstable species contained until they have proven themselves worthy of trust. Took a deep breath. She had prepared arguments for this. She had statistics showing humanity's peaceful record. She had testimonials from the few alien traders who had done business with human colonies. She had everything she needed to make a compelling case. But looking around the chamber, she realized that none of it would matter. The decision had already been made, probably long before she even arrived. This hearing was just a formality, a way for the Council to pretend that they had given humanity a fair chance. "And how exactly are we supposed to prove ourselves worthy?" asked. "Sector Omega-9 is nothing but dead systems, rogue planets, and stellar remnants. There are no habitable worlds there, no resources worth harvesting. You are not exiling us. You are sentencing us to death." Spoke again, his voice cold and final. "We are sentencing you to nothing. Sector Omega-9 is unclaimed territory. It belongs to no one, and therefore it is yours to do with as you please. If your species is as capable as you claim, then you will find a way to survive. If not, then you will prove that our decision was correct." "And if we do survive," demanded, "if we build something in that wasteland, will you welcome us back?" The High Arbiter's 4 eyes blinked slowly. "If your species survives long enough to develop true civilization, perhaps we will reconsider your application for membership. But I suspect you will do what all young species do. You will destroy yourselves within a few generations. It is the natural order of things." He waved one clawed hand dismissively. "This session is concluded. Ambassador Dawson, you have 12 standard hours to leave Council space. Any human vessel found within our borders after that time will be destroyed without warning." The Council members began to rise from their seats. Some of them glanced at with something that might have been pity, but most simply ignored her completely. She was already irrelevant to them, a footnote in the history of a species that would soon be forgotten. Stood frozen on her platform as the chamber emptied around her. She watched as beings who had just condemned 8 billion humans to exile filed out through doors that seemed to swallow them up. The living crystal walls shifted from cold blue to a muted gray, reflecting the emptiness of the space. When the last representative had gone, finally allowed herself to show what she was feeling. Her shoulders slumped. Her carefully maintained expression crumbled. She felt tears burning in her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. She had failed. She had been given the most important mission in human history, and she had failed. All those months of preparation, all those carefully crafted arguments, all that hope, and in the end it had meant nothing. The galaxy had looked at humanity and found them wanting. A soft sound behind her made turn. A single figure remained in the chamber, standing near one of the smaller exits. It was one of the youngest council species that Oran had mentioned. They were slender beings, almost delicate-looking, with skin like polished silver and large, dark eyes. This one wore simple gray robes rather than the elaborate ceremonial garments of the council members. "Ambassador Dawson," they said. Her voice was musical, almost pleasant. "I am sorry." Wiped her eyes quickly. "Are you voted with the rest of them?" "I did. I had no choice. The council demands unity on such matters." The moved closer, her movements graceful and flowing. "But that does not mean I agree with the decision." "Then why didn't you speak up?" "Because it would have accomplished nothing. Oran and the bloc control the council. They have for thousands of years. Any species that opposes them openly is marked for punishment." Those dark eyes were full of sadness. "My people learned that lesson long ago. When we first joined the council, we were idealistic. We believed in fairness and justice. We tried to change things from within. What happened? We were humiliated. marginalized, pushed to the edges of council space and access to the resources we needed to grow. It took us nearly 1,000 years to regain our standing, and we did it by learning to be quiet and obedient. She shook her head slowly. I am not proud of what we have become, but survival requires compromises. Stared at the for a long moment. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand something. The Council is not the galaxy. Oran and his allies believe they control everything, but they are wrong. The galaxy is vast beyond imagination. There are places they have never been, secrets they have never discovered, possibilities they have never considered. They reached into her robes and a small device, about the size of his palm. It was made of some dark material that seemed to absorb light. Take this, she said, pressing it into his hand. It contains star charts for Sector Omega 9, real charts, not the outdated fragments in your databases. It also contains something else, something that might help your people survive. Look down at the device. What is it? Information about the beings who came before, the ones we call the precursors. They were the first intelligent species in this galaxy, billions of years ago. They seeded life on countless worlds, including the of every council species, and then they disappeared. I've heard the legends. Most scientists think they're just myths. They are not myths. The precursors were real and they left behind artifacts, technologies, secrets. The council species have found a few of these caches over the and used them to advance their own civilizations, but they have only scratched the surface. The precursors hid their greatest treasures in the dark places of the galaxy, places like Sector Omega 9. Felt a spark of something she had thought was dead, hope. Why are you helping us? She asked. The smiled, and it transformed her face into something almost human. Because I remember what it was like to be young and idealistic. Because I believe the galaxy needs new voices, not just the same tired songs we have been singing for. And because I want to see what humanity can become when no one is watching. She stepped back toward the exit. Good luck, Ambassador Dawson. I hope we meet again someday under better circumstances. And then she was gone, slipping through the door like a silver ghost. Stood alone in the empty chamber, clutching the small device in her hand. Around her, the living crystal walls had shifted to a deep purple, the color of twilight, the color of endings, or perhaps the color of beginnings. She took one last look around the room where humanity's dreams had died, then turned and walked toward the exit. Her shuttle was waiting to carry her back to the fleet, where 8 billion people were about to learn that the galaxy wanted nothing to do with them. At the door, she paused and looked back at the empty chamber. You're making a mistake, she said quietly. You have no idea what we're capable of. The words echoed in the vast space, heard by no one, but somehow felt better for having said them. She walked out of the council building and into the bright light of an alien sun. The spaceport was bustling with activity, thousands of beings from dozens of species going about their daily lives. None of them paid any attention to the small human woman making her way through the crowd. She was invisible to them, irrelevant, already forgotten. Shuttle was parked at the far end of the port, in a section reserved for vessels from non-council species. It was a battered old transport, nothing like the sleek, elegant ships that the council members used. But it was home, and right now, wanted nothing more than to be back among her own kind. The pilot, a young man named Jack, was waiting by the boarding ramp. He was in his mid-20s, with sandy hair and a face that usually wore an easy smile. But today, his expression was worried. Ambassador, he said as approached, I heard the news, I'm sorry. Thank you, Jack, but we don't have time for sorrow right now. We need to get back to the fleet as quickly as possible. The Council has given us 12 hours to leave their space. Jack's eyes widened. 12 hours? That's impossible. The fleet is scattered across 3 systems. There's no way we can get everyone together and jump to the exile zone in that time. Then we'll have to try anyway. Get the engines warmed up. I need to contact Admiral Harrison. Climbed aboard the shuttle and made her way to the small communication station in the back. She sat down heavily in the chair and took a moment to compose herself before activating the link. Admiral Harrison's face appeared on the screen. She was in her 60s, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen too much. She had been the commander of Earth's deep space forces for 20 years, and in that time she had faced pirates, natural disasters, and first-contact situations that would have broken lesser officers. But even she looked shaken by what had to tell her. Exiled, the Admiral repeated when finished her report. They actually did it. They threw us out like garbage. We have 12 hours to clear their space. Anyone who remains after that will be killed. The Admiral closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, they were hard as stone. What about negotiations, appeals? There must be something we can do. I tried everything, Admiral. They don't want to listen. As far as the Council is concerned, we're not worth the trouble of keeping around. We're too young, too primitive, too dangerous. They'd rather send us off to die in the darkness than take a chance on us. And Sector Omega-9, what do we know about it? Thought of the device in her pocket, the gift from the stranger. More than they think we do. I have star charts and some other information that might help us survive, but I'll explain that later. Right now, we need to focus on getting everyone out. The Admiral nodded slowly. I've already begun preparations. We knew this was a possibility, so we had contingency plans in place. It won't be pretty, and we'll have to leave some things behind, but we can do it. What about the colonists, the settlements? We're evacuating everyone we can. The colonies closest to Council space will have to be abandoned completely. There's no time to dismantle them properly, but the people will be saved. That's what matters. Felt a wave of relief. At least there was that. The buildings and equipment could be replaced, but the people could not. What's the mood like? She asked. How are people taking the news? The Admiral's expression grew grim. About how you'd expect. Some are angry, some are scared, some are in denial. A lot of people believe that the Council would accept us, that we would finally have a place among the stars. Finding out that we've been rejected is like a punch to the gut. And you, Admiral, how are you feeling? Harrison looked at for a long moment. Then, slowly, a hard smile spread across her face. It was not a pleasant expression. I'm feeling determined, Ambassador. Those aliens think they can throw us away like trash and forget about us. They think we'll curl up and die in the darkness like good little primitives. Well, they're wrong. Humanity doesn't give up. We never have. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. We built civilizations out of nothing and rebuilt them when they fell. We are the most stubborn, most adaptable, most relentless species in the universe, and we will not go quietly. Felt a spark of that same determination kindle in her own chest. The Admiral was right. This was not the end. It was just a setback. What do you need from me? She asked. Get back here as fast as you can. We're going to need everyone working together to pull this off. And the Admiral paused. Don't blame yourself for this. You did everything you could. The Council was never going to give us a fair chance. They made up their minds before you even got there. I know, but it still hurts. It should hurt. That pain means you care. Hold on to it. Use it. Turn it into fuel for the journey ahead. The connection ended and sat alone in the quiet shuttle. Through the small window beside her, she could see the alien spaceport bustling with activity. Ships coming and going, beings of all shapes and sizes conducting their business, living their lives. None of them knew or cared about the drama that had just played out in the Council chamber. To them, humanity was just another footnote, already being erased from their collective memory. Pulled out the device they had given her and studied it. It was warm in her hand, almost alive. She thought about what the silver-skinned stranger had said, about the precursors and their hidden treasures, about the dark places of the galaxy where secrets waited to be discovered. Sector Omega-9 was supposed to be their grave, but maybe, just maybe, it could become something else. The shuttle shuddered as the engines came to life. Jack's voice came over the intercom. "We're clear for departure, Ambassador, setting course for the fleet rendezvous point." "Thank you, Jack, best speed." Felt the shuttle lift off and begin its climb toward orbit. Below her, the alien world grew smaller, its gleaming cities and green fields shrinking until they were just spots of color against the blue and white of the atmosphere. And then even that was gone, replaced by the infinite blackness of space. She pressed her face against the window and watched as the stars appeared, millions of them, countless points of light scattered across the darkness. Somewhere out there, in a corner of the galaxy that no one wanted, humanity would have to build a new home, a new future. It seemed impossible. The odds were stacked against them. The Council had given them nothing, and Sector Omega-9 was everything they claimed, a wasteland of dead stars and frozen worlds and empty void. But as watched the stars slide past, she felt something new growing in her heart. Not hope exactly, something harder than that, something with teeth. The galaxy had rejected humanity, had called them young and primitive and worthless, had thrown them away without a second thought. Fine. Let them underestimate us, thought. Let them forget about us. Let them believe we'll simply roll over and die. And when we prove them wrong, when we build something magnificent in the darkness, when we emerge from the exile stronger than before, they'll realize their mistake. But by then, it will be too late. The shuttle accelerated into the void, carrying its precious cargo toward an uncertain future. Behind it, the Council's domain spread across hundreds of systems, vast and ancient and utterly convinced of its own superiority. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. The evacuation of humanity's colonies was the largest logistical operation in the species' history. In less than 12 hours, millions of people had to be loaded onto ships, the ships had to be gathered into a fleet, and the fleet had to be moved across hundreds of light years to reach the exile zone before the Council's deadline. It should have been impossible, everyone said so. The distances were too great, the time too short, the resources too limited. There was no way to do it without leaving people behind. But humanity had a long history of doing impossible things. Admiral Harrison coordinated the effort from the bridge of the Endurance, the largest ship in the human fleet. It was an ugly vessel, all function and no form, built to carry as many people and supplies as possible rather than to look impressive. Right now, it was packed to capacity with refugees from the nearest colonies, families huddled together in cargo holds and corridors, children crying while their parents tried to stay calm. "Status report," the Admiral demanded. Her executive officer commander checked his displays. "All major colonies have been evacuated. We've got everyone aboard the fleet. Some of the smaller outposts couldn't be reached in time. Maybe 10,000 people total. They're hiding, hopping the Council patrols won't find them." "The Council won't bother with 10,000 humans. They're not worth the fuel." The Admiral's voice was bitter. "What about our ships? Did we lose any?" "3 freighters, engine failures. They couldn't keep up with the fleet." Paused. "The crews chose to stay aboard rather than slow us down. They said they'd rather die free than live as refugees." Harrison closed her eyes. 3 ships, maybe 1,000 people, gone because the Council couldn't give them a few more hours. "Note their names in the log. We'll remember them." "Yes, Admiral." The fleet consisted of nearly 200 vessels of all sizes, from massive colony ships to tiny shuttles. They flew in a loose formation, their running lights creating a river of stars moving through the darkness. It was the largest gathering of human spacecraft ever assembled, and it was headed toward the unknown. Dawson stood at the back of the Endurance's bridge, watching the Admiral work. She had delivered her report and handed over this device, and now there was nothing for her to do but wait. The next few hours would determine whether humanity had any future at all. "Ambassador," Admiral Harrison called without turning around. "Come here, I want to show you something." Approached the main. On it was a star chart showing the fleet's current position and their destination. Sector Omega 9 was marked in red, a vast region of space on the far edge of the galaxy. Between them and it was the border of Council territory, a line they had to cross before the deadline. "We're going to make it," the Admiral said, "with about 2 hours to spare, but look at this." She zoomed in on a section of the border, saw a cluster of dots moving in a patrol pattern. "Council warships," explained. "They're watching us, making sure we leave." "Are they going to attack?" "I don't think so. This is a show of force. They want us to see them, to know that they could destroy us if they wanted to. It's a reminder of who's in charge." Stared at the patrol ships. They were tiny on the screen, but she knew that each one was capable of destroying half the human fleet. The Council species had weapons that humanity couldn't even understand, let alone match. If they decided to attack, there would be nothing anyone could do. "I hate this," whispered. "I hate being powerless." "We won't be powerless forever." The Admiral's voice was quiet but fierce. "This is a setback, not an ending. We're going to survive this exile, Ambassador. We're going to build something in the darkness, and someday we're going to come back." "You really believe that?" Harrison turned to look at directly. Her eyes were burning with a fire that seemed impossible in someone her age. "I have to believe it, because if I don't, then what's the point? Why keep fighting? Why keep struggling? Why not just give up and let the darkness take us?" She turned back to the... "No, we're better than that. We're stronger than that. The Council thinks they know what humanity is capable of, but they don't have a clue. They've never seen what we can do when we're desperate, when we're cornered, when we have nothing left to lose." The fleet continued its journey through the void. Hour by hour, they drew closer to the border. The Council patrol ships shadowed them the entire way, silent and menacing. And then finally, they crossed the line. The border was invisible, of course. There was no physical barrier separating Council space from the exile zone, but everyone aboard the fleet knew when they passed it. The Council ships stopped following and turned away, their mission complete. Humanity had been expelled from civilized space. "We're through," Commander reported. "All ships have crossed into Sector Omega 9. The bridge was silent. No one cheered. No one celebrated. They had survived, but survival was just the beginning. Admiral Harrison stood up from her command chair and addressed the entire bridge crew. "From this moment on, we're on our own. No help is coming. No one is going to save us. Everything we need to survive we'll have to find or build ourselves. It's going to be hard, harder than anything we've ever done. Some of us won't make it." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But we will not give up. We will not despair. We will not go quietly into the night. Humanity has faced extinction before and found a way to survive. We'll do it again. Not because we have to, but because that's who we are. We're survivors. We're builders. We're dreamers. And no matter how dark the night gets, we will always find a way to light a fire." She looked around the bridge, meeting the eyes of each crew member in turn. "Welcome to our new home. Let's get to work." The fleet pressed deeper into Sector Omega 9, leaving the Council's light behind them. Ahead was nothing but darkness, cold, and the unknown. But also perhaps something more. Thought of this words, about the precursors and their hidden treasures, about the secrets waiting in the dark places of the galaxy. She pulled out the device and looked at it again. It pulsed gently in her hand as if it was alive, as if it was waiting. The banishment had begun, but so had something else. Something the Council would never expect. Something that would change the galaxy forever. In the darkness of Sector Omega 9, humanity took its first steps toward a future no one could have imagined. They didn't know what lay ahead. They didn't know what challenges they would face. All they knew was that they were alone, and that survival depended on no one but themselves. It was terrifying. It was also, in a strange way, liberating. For the first time in their history, humans were truly free. Free from the expectations of the Council. Free from the need to prove themselves to beings who would never accept them. Free to become whatever they wanted to become. The darkness surrounded them on all sides, vast and cold and empty. But in that darkness, Dawson saw something the Council had missed. Potential. And as the fleet sailed deeper into the void, she began to smile. Let the Council forget about us, she thought. Let them think we're already dead. When we return, they'll learn just how wrong they were. The first day of humanity's exile ended with the fleet establishing a temporary camp around a rogue planet drifting through the void. It was a frozen ball of rock and ice, utterly lifeless, but it provided a reference point in the endless darkness. Stood at the viewport of her tiny cabin aboard the Endurance, looking out at the stars. They seemed different here somehow, colder, more distant. The familiar constellations she had grown up with were gone, distorted by the fleet's journey to this forgotten corner of the galaxy. She should have been sleeping. Everyone aboard the fleet was exhausted from the frantic evacuation, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the council chamber. She heard Oran's clicking laughter. She felt the weight of billions of hopes crushing down on her shoulders. A soft chime at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she said without turning. The door slid open, and Admiral Harrison entered. She looked as tired as felt, but there was an energy about her that seemed to push back against the exhaustion. "I thought I'd find you awake," said. "Mind some company." "Please." The Admiral came to stand beside at the viewport. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just looked out at the darkness together. "I used to dream about the stars when I was a little girl," finally said. "I'd sneak out of bed at night and climb onto the roof of our farmhouse in Iowa. I'd lie there for hours just looking up, wondering what was out there, imagining all the amazing things we'd find when we finally reached the cosmos." She let out a small, bitter laugh. "I never imagined this, being thrown out like unwanted trash, sent to die in a corner of the galaxy that nobody wants." "Neither did I," admitted. "When I was chosen as ambassador, I really believed I could convince them. I thought if I just explained everything clearly enough, if I showed them what humanity could offer, they'd have to accept us." "You couldn't have known. The deck was stacked against us from the start." "I know, but it still feels like failure." The Admiral was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out the device they had given. "I had our scientists take a look at this," she said. "They couldn't make much sense of most of it. The technology is beyond anything we've ever seen, but they did manage to access the star charts. And Sector Omega-9 is bigger than we thought, much bigger. It covers nearly a tenth of the galaxy's spiral arm. There are thousands of star systems in there, most of them dead or dying, but some of them," paused, "some of them have something." "Something?" "We're not sure yet. The charts mark certain locations with symbols that don't match any language in our databases. Our best guess is that they indicate points of interest, places where the precursors might have left something behind." Felt her heart beat faster. So the was telling the truth. There really are secrets hidden in the darkness. "It looks that way. The question is whether we can find them and whether they'll be any use to us if we do." The Admiral handed the device back to, "But it's something, a chance, better than nothing." "What's our next move?" "We establish a permanent base of operations, somewhere defensible, somewhere with access to whatever resources we can scrape together. From there, we start exploring. We send out scout ships to investigate those marked locations. We gather information. We learn everything we can about this place that's supposed to be our grave." Turn to look at directly. "I want you to lead the exploration effort. You're the best diplomat we have, which means you're also the best at understanding alien cultures and technologies. If we find precursor artifacts, you're our best chance at figuring out what they mean." Me was startled, but I'm not a scientist, I'm not even a pilot. You don't need to be. You need to be curious. You need to be clever. You need to be willing to look at something nobody has ever seen before and try to understand it. The Admiral smiled slightly. You also need to be stubborn enough to keep going when everything seems impossible. Based on what you did in that council chamber, I'd say you qualify. Look down at the device in her hand. It pulsed gently like a heartbeat. "All right," she said slowly. "I'll do it, but I have one condition." "Name it." "I want access to everything. Every piece of information we have, every theory our scientists come up with, every rumor and legend and myth about the precursors. I want to know everything." The Admiral nodded. "Done. I'll have Commander give you full security clearance." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start building our future. It's going to be a long road." After the Admiral left, sat down on her narrow bunk and stared at the device. The had called it information about the precursors. But what kind of information? And why had she given it to a human ambassador from a species the Council had just thrown away? Questions without answers, the first of many. Placed the device on her small desk and lay back on her bunk. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the small dramas of the beings who lived among them. Somewhere out there in the darkness of Sector Omega-9, secrets were waiting. Ancient technologies, lost knowledge, the legacy of beings who had walked the stars before the Council species even existed. Didn't know if humanity would find those secrets. She didn't know if they would survive long enough to try. All she knew was that she was going to do everything in her power to give her people a chance. The Council had cast them out, had called them unworthy, had expected them to die. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. As sleep finally began to claim her, made herself a promise that she would repeat every day for the rest of her life, no matter how dark things got. We will survive. We will grow strong. And one day we will return. The first night of humanity's exile ended with the fleet floating in darkness, surrounded by the cold light of distant stars. It was the end of one chapter in human history, and the beginning of another.